Aggregation and group by methods in Pandas are essential for summarizing and analyzing data. When it comes to aggregation, it involves computing a summary statistic or statistics about each group, which can include functions like mean, median, min, max, sum, count, and so on. So let's start off by creating a sample data frame that contains sales data from a fictional retail store. So I'm going to copy over a prepared data frame that I've created here. So you could pause the video here and copy over these values, and we're going to be working on this data frame here. So this data frame includes our product ID, the categories, so electronics, furniture, and so on, the quantity sold, and the revenue that we got from each product. And if we take a look at our data frame that we created, this is how it's going to look like. So it's always a good practice to take a quick look at our data frame, how it's structured, and how it looks like before we get into any type of aggregations. So let's start off with some basic summary of statistics. You can use the describe method, which generates descriptive statistics that summarizes the central tendency, dispersion, and shape of the dataset's distribution. So when we create a new line here and we do our df data frame dot describe, and when we run this, we get this nice little table here that gives us the various types of statistics for each column. So we have the count of each element or each row in the specific column. So here we have specifically 6 rows. So we take a look here, that's 6 rows. So it has a count of 6 for each column. It could calculate the mean for each column, the standard deviation, the min, the percentiles, 25, 15, 75, and the max. So this really comes in handy when we want to have a quick statistical overview and to get maybe a better idea of how our data frame looks like exactly. Sometimes transposing the summary statistics can make them easier to read, especially when dealing with many columns. So if we have lots of more columns, then this would be extended much more to the right. So to kind of help us read this better, we could do the transpose method. And when we do that, it transposes or kind of flips it. And we have the columns on the left side, and then here the column names on the left side, and the specific statistical descriptions are on the columns now here. You can calculate specific aggregation metrics on individual columns as well. So let's say we wanted to get the mean or the average value of the quantity sold. So we use our data frame and we would get the quantity sold column, and we want to calculate the mean. So we would use the mean method here. And when we run that, we have an average of 33.3, and that returns a float, and specifically a NumPy type of float. We can also calculate the median, or basically the middle value when the data is sorted. So we could try this again using, let's say, the revenue column. So we could do df revenue, and we want to calculate the median of the revenue, and we get 2,750. We can calculate the mode or the most frequently occurring values. So let's try the quantity sold again. So we could do df quantity sold, and similarly again, we could do mode, and we get the specific frequency for each row. In this case, we have exactly one value of each for each row, so there aren't really any duplicates or any frequently occurring values here in this example. We could calculate the standard deviation, which measures the amount of variation or dispersion of a set of values. So again, we could take a look at our revenue, and using the std method, we could calculate the, whoops, I meant std method, and we get the standard deviation of our revenue. We can also calculate the variance, which calculates how far the numbers are spread out from the average value. So going back to, let's say, our quantity, for example, df quantity sold dot var method for variance, and that gives us the variance. And similarly, we could also calculate the sum, which adds up all the values in the column. So again, use this example, change this to sum, run this, and we have the sum total. And we could, of course, calculate the product of all the values in a column. So instead of sum, we use prod, and we run that, and we get the product. So in other words, it multiplies all the values together. Now, group by methods involve splitting the data into groups based on some criteria, applying a function to each group independently, and then combining the results back together. So let's take a look at our data frame again, which is going to be our quick overview here. And suppose we want to analyze the sales data by category. So we want to analyze based on the categories, and we want to group these categories together and analyze the sales based on each category. So to do that, we would do first create a grouped object, which is going to be holding our grouped data together. And we're going to do a df data frame and then group by method, and by what way we want to group our data, and that's going to be the category column. And so when we run that, we could take a look and see that this is actually only an object, so we can't really see anything yet. So we have to first now apply specific methods that we want to do on that grouped data. So here, let's say we want to calculate the average for each group. Specifically, we want to calculate the quantity sold, the average quantity sold for each group. So now we use our groups object, and we select the quantity sold column, and we want to calculate the mean. And when we run that, we see the average quantity that we have sold for each specific group. So electronics, futures, furnitures, and office supplies. So again, we grouped our data based on the categories first. Then we selected the quantity sold column. So we wanted to take a look at this column, and we wanted to calculate the average for each group. So for electronics, it will be the average of these two values. For furniture, it will be these two values, and office supplies for these two values. And that's how we get three specific values, which is the average for each specific category. Let's say now we want to calculate the sum revenue for each group or each category. So again, we would use our groups object. This time we want to select the revenue column, and we want to get the sum for each category. And here we calculated the sum for each category. Now let's say we want to find out what's the minimum and maximum values for each category. And specifically, let's say we want to get the minimum and maximum quantities sold for each category. And to do that, we would use the grouped object again. Then we would select the quantity sold column. And here we would use the aggregating method or the AGG. And here we would provide the methods or the things that we want to find, which is going to be the minimum and maximum quality. So here we'll provide a list. It will be min and max, except in string format. And when we run this, we get the minimum and maximum values for each category. And again, if we take a quick look at our data frame, we only have 2 values, of course, of each, but if we had more, then we would be able to find the minimum and maximum. But here like I said, electronics 30 and then 45, so this is the min and that's the max. And same thing for furniture, 5 and 10, and so on. We can even change this to use, instead of max, say we wanted the sum. And if we run this, then it will calculate the sum instead of the max. So we have min and sum. So this is a nice way to kind of group and aggregate lots of information together. You can also group the data by multiple columns. So here we only have been grouping it based on one column, but we could also group it by multiple columns. So let's say we want to group category and the product ID columns. So here we'll create a new grouping object, which is going to be called grouped multi. And this is going to be df group by. And here we're going to provide a list of columns that we want to group. So it's going to be category and product ID, except in string format. And when we run this, we have our grouped multi object. So now let's say we want to calculate the total sum of the quantity sold for each product in each category. So using our grouped multi object, we want to check out the quantity sold column and we want to calculate the sum. And so now we have 2 columns that we've grouped by. So it's each category, and with each category, each product that is in that specific category. And we have the total sum of quantity sold for each specific product in each specific category. Now, of course, here we only have one product, and for each product, there's only one value. But if we had multiple products, maybe with the same product ID, then we will be able to sum those values. Now, using the aggregate function that we used earlier, we could also use it to perform multiple aggregations on one or more columns. So this starts to get a little bit more advanced, but let's jump back to our previous grouped object, where we used only one category or only one column that we used for grouping instead of 2, which was the category column. And let's say we want to analyze different statistical methods for 2 specific columns. So we have our grouped object, which is grouped by the category. And now we want to use the aggregate function. And here we're going to provide a dictionary. And here we're going to provide the columns that we want to take a look at and the statistical methods that we want to calculate. So we want to, let's say, take a look at the quantity sold column. And here we want to calculate multiple things. So we want to calculate the min value, the max value, and the mean. And let's say we also want to take a look at the revenue column. and we want to calculate the sum and the mean. Okay. And when we run this, we have our grouped data based on the categories, so the electronics, furniture, and office supplies. Now we want to take a look at the quantity sold and the revenue. So once again, let's actually take a quick look at our data frame again so that we understand. So we grouped our data based on the categories, so electronics, furniture, and office supplies. And we have these two values. And so we wanted to calculate or check the min, max, and mean values for the quantities sold column. So this is grouped by electronics, and we calculate the min, the max, and the average of the two values. So we get min, max, and mean for electronics. And then same thing again for furniture. We group this together, and then we calculate the min, max, and mean for these two values. And again, office supplies, mean, max, and mean for these two values. And we get these three values for each of these categories. So this is for the quantity sold. And then additionally, we wanted to check or look at the revenue column. And here we wanted to calculate the sum and the mean of the revenue. So again, using the electronics category, which was grouped together, we took these two values and calculated the sum, which turns out to be 7,500. Here we calculated the sum, which is 3,000, and so on. And so we calculated the sum and the mean of the revenue for each specific category. So this is really, really comes in handy for kind of these complex operations and being able to analyze the various statistics of our data frames. And this could help to answer a lot of our questions or help to better understand the data of our data frames. You can also apply custom functions to your groups by using the apply method as well. So let's say we wanted to calculate the data range of the quantities sold for each group or each category. So let's create a custom function and let's call it a data range function. And we're going to provide x, which is the value which we're going to be passing in. And we're going to return x dot max minus x dot min. So that calculates the range. And now we're going to use our grouped object, and we want to take a look at our quantity sold column. And here we want to apply our custom function, which is going to be data range. And so when we run this, we made a small mistake. It should be data range. There we go. And then we run that again, and we get the range for each specific category. So it passes in a list of the values. So for electronics, it would pass in these two values. Then it would calculate the max of the two, then the min of the two, and then subtract the max from the min and return one value. And it'll apply this for each category. And that's what we get these values for each specific category. So you could apply various custom functions to calculate your own specific statistics. Become a member at AILearningHub.io and get access to personalized mentor guidance, early access to AI resources, help with AI projects, and a great learning community.